Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness costs you everything, and changes everything too. The rain comes down in sheets, heavy and relentless, drenching the streets of Chicago in minutes. Headlights blur into streaks of gold. Tires hiss across wet asphalt. And under the flickering glow of a broken street lamp, Ethan Cole stands with his shoulders hunched, gripping the handle of a worn-out umbrella that barely holds against the wind. His jacket is already soaked through at the edges, cold creeping into his bones. But he doesn't move, because moving means stepping back into a life that feels like it's falling apart, a missed rent payment, a job that disappeared last week, a phone with no new messages, no new chances, just silence. Then he sees her, across the street at first, standing there like she doesn't belong in this storm. Like the rain caught her by surprise. Her hair clings to her face, her blouse darkened by water, her arms wrapped tightly around herself as if trying to hold on to whatever warmth she has left. She hesitates at the curb, looking lost, not weak, just unprepared. And something about that hits him harder than the rain ever could. He could look away. Most people do. Pretend not to notice. Protect what little he has left. But instead, Ethan exhales slowly, steps forward, and crosses into the storm. The wind pushes against him as he lifts the umbrella higher, angling it over her without a word. She startles, eyes wide, searching his face like she's trying to understand why. Why him? Why now? Why anyone would stop? You don't have to do that, she says softly, her voice almost lost in the rain. But he just shrugs, water dripping from his hair, his sleeves, his life. Yeah, I do, he replies, simple, steady, like it's the most obvious thing in the world. They stand there together under that small circle of shelter, close enough to hear each other breathe, the city rushing around them. But for a moment, everything slows. Why would you help a stranger? She asks, quieter this time, and Ethan lets out a faint, almost tired smile, eyes drifting past her to the endless gray sky. Because no one helped me yesterday, he says, and something shifts in her expression, something deeper than surprise, something real, like she's been searching for that exact answer her whole life. A pair of headlights cuts through the rain, a sleek black SUV pulling up beside them. Too clean, too polished for this part of the city. The door opens instantly. A man in a suit steps out with urgency. Miss Hayes, he says, holding another umbrella, larger, stronger. Waiting, she hesitates, just for a second, looking back at Ethan, memorizing him. The way his hand still holds the umbrella over her. The way he doesn't ask for anything in return. Thank you, she whispers, and it feels heavier than those two words should. Then she steps away, slipping into the car. The door shuts, and just like that, she's gone, leaving Ethan standing there as the storm crashes back down on him. The umbrella now useless against the weight of everything. He watches the taillights disappear into the night, unaware that the woman he just protected isn't just anyone. The rain does not follow him home, but the cold does, seeping into his skin as Ethan walks the last 3 blocks to the place he has been calling home for the past week, a rusted pickup truck parked behind an old hardware store. The kind of place no one looks twice at. He pulls the door open and slides inside. The seat stiff, the air damp, the silence heavy. He sits there for a moment, hands still curled like he is holding that umbrella, like he is still standing beside her, and he lets out a slow breath, not regret, not pride, just something in between, something quiet. He reaches over and grabs a dry shirt from the back seat, changing quickly, his fingers stiff from the cold, and for a second, he wonders if that was a mistake, giving up the only thing that kept him dry. But then he remembers the way she looked at him, not with pity, not with fear, but with something he cannot quite name, and that thought stays with him longer than the warmth ever could. The next morning comes too early, sunlight cutting through the cracked windshield, the city already moving, already forgetting. Ethan rubs his eyes and steps out into the noise, grabbing a cup of cheap coffee from a corner store with the last few dollars in his pocket. He walks past construction sites, past people rushing to jobs he no longer has, until he stops in front of a small diner with a help wanted sign taped crookedly on the glass. He hesitates, then pushes the door open. The bell above it rings, sharp and hopeful. Inside smells like bacon and burnt toast, the kind of place where nobody asks too many questions. He speaks to the manager, answers simply, honestly, and somehow, By noon, he has a job, temporary, nothing fancy, but enough to keep moving forward, enough to pretend things are not falling apart. Across the city, far above the streets, Olivia Hayes stands in front of a wall of glass, the skyline stretching endlessly beneath her, her hair now dry, her clothes replaced with something sharp, controlled, powerful, everything about her back in place except her thoughts, because they are still somewhere out there in the rain, standing under a small, worn umbrella with a man who did not even ask her name. "Did you find him?" she asks without turning, her voice calm but carrying something underneath. The assistant behind her hesitates, tablet in hand. "We are working on it, Miss Hayes, but there is no record, no card, no trace." Olivia closes her eyes for a second, replaying the moment, the way he stood there, soaked, steady, like nothing else mattered. "Find him," she says again, softer this time, but firmer. "He did not help me because of who I am. He helped me because of who he is." The assistant nods quickly and leaves. The room falls quiet again. Olivia walks to her desk, but she does not sit. Instead, she reaches into her bag and pulls out something small, something almost forgotten, a folded receipt she picked up by accident when she stepped under his umbrella. She smooths it out slowly, eyes scanning the faded ink. And there it is, a name printed faintly at the top from a nearby store. "Ethan Cole." She whispers it once, testing how it feels, like it might disappear if she says it too loud. Then she looks back out at the city, millions of people moving, blending, vanishing into each other. But not him, not anymore. Because now she knows who she is looking for. And somewhere down below, Ethan steps out of that diner into the afternoon light, unaware that the quiet moment he almost forgot has already begun to change everything. By the third day, the routine begins to settle into something that almost feels normal, but not quite, because nothing about Ethan Cole's life has ever truly been steady. The diner opens before sunrise, and he is already there, wiping down counters, refilling coffee cups, moving quietly through the rhythm of other people's mornings. He listens more than he speaks, nods when spoken to, smiles when needed. And somehow that is enough. Customers start to recognize him. The older man who always orders the same eggs and toast gives him a small nod of approval. A tired mother thanks him for being patient with her noisy kids. And for the first time in weeks, Ethan feels like he exists again, not as a problem to solve, but as a person in motion. Still, every now and then, his mind drifts back to that night, to the rain, to her, not because he expects anything from it, but because something about it refuses to fade, like a moment that mattered more than it should have. Across the city, Olivia Hayes is not following any routine at all. Her schedule is packed, meetings stacked back to back, investors waiting, decisions that affect thousands resting on her voice. But none of it holds her attention the way it used to, because in between every conversation, every signature, every polished smile, there is a quiet interruption in her thoughts, a memory of standing under that umbrella, of hearing a man say something so simple it felt like truth stripped down to its core. She tries to focus. She really does. But even during a presentation, her eyes flick briefly to the name written on the corner of her notes. Ethan Cole, like it anchors her to something real, something outside the glass walls and controlled environments. "We found a match," her assistant finally says later that afternoon, stepping into the office with careful excitement. Olivia looks up immediately, not composed this time, not distant, just present. "Where?" she asks, one word, direct. The assistant taps the tablet and turns it toward her. A small diner appears on the screen. Nothing impressive, just a place people pass without noticing. He started working there 2 days ago. Olivia studies the image, the faded sign, the simple windows, and something softens in her expression. Not pity, not curiosity, something closer to certainty. She stands up without hesitation, grabbing her coat. "Cancel my evening," she says, already moving. The assistant blinks, surprised. "You have a dinner with the board." Olivia pauses just long enough to respond, her voice calm but unmovable. "Then they can wait." Minutes later, the same black SUV cuts through the late afternoon traffic. But this time, it is not about control or schedule. It is about something far less predictable, far more human. The car stops a block away from the diner. Olivia steps out, choosing to walk the rest of the way, heels softer against the pavement, her pace slower, almost cautious, as if she is stepping into a world that does not belong to her. Inside, Ethan is pouring coffee, back turned. Unaware, the bell above the door rings as she pushes it open. The sound small, almost insignificant, but somehow it shifts the air in the room. He turns, not expecting anything unusual, just another customer. But then he sees her, and for a brief second, time does something strange. It stretches. It pauses. Recognition flickers across his face, not fully formed, not yet, but enough to make him look twice, because she looks different now, composed, confident, like someone who belongs to a completely different life. And yet, there is something in her eyes that feels exactly the same as that night in the rain. And before either of them can say a word, before the moment can settle into something defined, the world between them begins to shift again in ways neither of them is ready for a moment. Neither of them moves. The low hum of conversation and clinking plates, filling the space between them. But it feels distant, like the world has stepped back just enough to let something quieter take over. Ethan blinks once, then again, trying to place her, because he knows he has seen her before, not just her face, but the feeling that comes with it. Something unfinished, something that did not end the way it should have. He sets the coffee pot down slowly, wiping his hands on a towel that suddenly feels too small for what this moment has become. "Do I know you?" he asks, not cold, not suspicious, just honest. And Olivia feels that question land deeper than she expected, because she realizes in that second that to him, she is just another stranger walking into a diner, not a memory, not a turning point, just a face he is trying to recognize. And somehow, that matters more than anything else. She could tell him the truth. She could say your umbrella, the storm, that night when everything changed, but she does not. Instead, she offers a small smile, softer than the ones she gives in boardrooms. "I do not think so," she says, her voice calm, controlled. But there is something underneath it, something careful, like she is choosing every word with intention. Ethan studies her for a second longer, then nods once, accepting the answer even if something inside him is not entirely convinced. "What can I get you?" he asks, slipping back into the rhythm of the diner, but not quite the same as before, because now there is awareness, a quiet pull he cannot explain. Olivia takes a seat at the counter, her fingers brushing lightly against the surface, grounding herself in a place that feels so far from her world. "Coffee is fine," she replies, watching him move, noticing the way he carries himself, steady, unhurried, like he does not need to prove anything to anyone. He pours the coffee and slides the mug toward her, their hands almost touching for a brief second, and that same flicker of recognition passes between them again, not fully understood, but impossible to ignore. "You knew around here?" she asks, keeping her tone casual, like this is just another conversation. Ethan leans against the counter slightly, glancing around the diner as if measuring his answer. "Yeah, just started a couple days ago," he says, then adds with a faint smile, "Trying to stay out of the rain, I guess." The words hang there for a second longer than they should, and Olivia feels her chest tighten just slightly, because he does not realize how close he is to remembering, how close he is to connecting the pieces. She takes a slow sip of her coffee, letting the warmth settle. "You like it?" she asks, and he shrugs, simple, honest. "It is work. That is enough for now," he says, and there is no bitterness in it, just acceptance, something that feels rare in a world that always wants more, always demands more. Olivia watches him carefully, not as a CEO observing an employee, but as someone trying to understand a person who exists completely outside her usual world. And the more she watches, the more certain she becomes that what happened that night was not random. That kindness like his does not happen by accident. It is who he is, and that is exactly what she has been searching for. But before she can say anything else, before the moment can deepen into something more, the front door swings open again. And this time, the energy shifts completely. Two men in suits step inside, out of place, out of rhythm with everything this diner represents. Their eyes scan the room quickly until they land on her, and in that instant, Ethan sees something change, not in them, but in her, something controlled, something powerful, something that does not belong here at all. "Miss Hayes," one of them says, respectful, direct, and the name hits Ethan like a quiet echo, not loud, not dramatic, but enough to crack something open in his mind, because suddenly, she is not just a stranger anymore, and whatever this moment is about to become. It is no longer simple. The name lingers in the air longer than it should, quiet, but heavy, like something that does not belong in a place like this. Ethan does not react immediately, but something inside him shifts, a subtle tightening in his chest as he looks at her again. Really looks this time, not just at her face, but at the way she holds herself, the calm in her posture, the kind of confidence that does not need to be announced. And suddenly, pieces begin to move in his mind, not fully formed, but enough to make him pause. The men in suits step closer, one of them, lowering his voice slightly. The board is waiting, Miss Hayes. And there it is again, that name, spoken like it carries weight, importance, expectation. Olivia exhales softly, not annoyed, not surprised, just interrupted. She turns her head slightly toward them. "Give me a minute," she says, her tone still gentle, but firm enough that they both stop without question, and Ethan notices that, the way they listen, the way they wait, like she is not someone you rush, not someone you question. He straightens slightly, the towel still in his hand, his mind catching up to what his instincts already felt. "Hayes," he repeats under his breath, almost to himself, and Olivia hears it. Of course she does, she always does, but this time, it feels different, because it is not coming from a place of recognition. It is coming from realization, slow and unfolding. She turns back to him, meeting his eyes fully now. No more distance, no more careful separation between worlds, just the truth hovering between them, unspoken but impossible to ignore. "You are not just here for coffee," Ethan says quietly, not accusing, not defensive, just stating what now feels obvious. Olivia holds his gaze for a second longer than she planned, then shakes her head slightly, a small, honest admission. "No," she says, and there is something vulnerable in that single word, something that does not belong to the CEO people see on screens. Ethan lets out a short breath, almost a laugh, but not quite, more like disbelief catching up with reality. He sets the towel down, leaning both hands on the counter now, grounding himself. "So which part is real?" he asks. And this time, there is something behind it, not anger, but a quiet demand for truth. Olivia does not look away, does not deflect, because she understands what this moment is. She understands what it costs him to ask that question. "All of it," she says softly, and for a second, the diner feels too small to hold what that answer means. Ethan studies her face, searching for something, anything that feels false, but he does not find it. And that only makes it harder, because if she is telling the truth, then everything he thought he understood about that night, about her, about the way the world works, it all shifts. "You knew," he says slowly, the realization forming as he speaks. "You knew who I was when you walked in." Olivia hesitates, just enough to answer honestly. "I knew your name," she admits, and that is enough. Enough for Ethan to look away for the first time, his jaw tightening slightly as he processes it. Not anger, not yet, just the weight of being seen without realizing it. The weight of being part of something he did not agree to. He nods once, a small motion, but it carries more than words. "Right?" he says quietly, and in that single word, there is distance now, a line that did not exist before. Olivia feels it immediately, like something fragile just cracked between them, and for the first time since she stepped into that diner, she is not in control of what happens next. Because whatever this moment is turning into, it is no longer just about finding him. It is about whether he will choose to stay or walk away. The space between them does not close. It stretches, quiet but undeniable, like something fragile has been pulled too far to return to what it was. Ethan keeps his eyes down for a moment, his hands resting on the counter as if he needs something solid to hold on to. The noise of the diner slowly returns around them, plates clinking, a low murmur of conversation, but it all feels distant now, like it belongs to a different scene. He exhales slowly, then looks back up at her, not confused anymore, not unsure, just clear. "You should have said something," he says, his voice calm, but carrying a weight that was not there before. Olivia feels it immediately, the shift from curiosity to something more grounded, more guarded. She nods slightly, accepting the truth in his words. "I wanted to," she replies, her tone Softer now, stripped of any authority, just a person speaking to another person, but I was not sure you would have stayed if I did. Ethan lets out a small breath at that. Not quite a laugh, but close enough to carry disbelief. So you decided for me, he says, and this time, there is a quiet edge, not anger, but something protective, something that has learned the hard way not to be pulled into things without choice. Olivia opens her mouth to respond, then pauses, because she knows there is no easy way to explain this without it sounding exactly like what it is, a decision made without him, a moment shaped without his consent. I did, she admits, and the honesty lands heavier than any excuse could have. Ethan nods once, absorbing it, his jaw tightening just slightly before he looks away again, not to avoid her, but to think, to steady himself, because part of him understands why she did it, and another part of him cannot ignore how it feels, being seen, being searched for, being found, all without knowing. That night, he says after a moment, his voice quieter now, you did not look like someone who needed anything. Olivia watches him carefully, every word, every pause, feeling the distance between who she is and who he thought she was. I did, she says gently, and there is no performance in it, no image to maintain, just truth, just not in the way you expected. Ethan meets her eyes again, searching, weighing, and for a second, something soft returns, something that remembers the rain, the way she stood there, unguarded, real, but it does not fully stay, not yet, because now there is context, there is power, there is a difference that cannot be ignored. So what is this? He asks, gesturing slightly between them, not dramatic, just honest, a thank you, or something else. Olivia hesitates, not because she does not know the answer, but because she knows what it means to say it out loud. She takes a small breath, steadying herself in a way she rarely has to. It started as a thank you, she says, her voice steady but quieter than before. But it is not that anymore. The words hang there, simple, but heavy with implication. Ethan studies her again, longer this time, and something shifts behind his eyes, not rejection, not acceptance, just uncertainty. The kind that does not resolve in a single moment, the kind that needs time, space, something real to build on. He straightens up, stepping back slightly from the counter, creating just enough distance to breathe again. I have a shift, he says, not as an excuse, but as a boundary, something he can control. Olivia nods immediately, respecting it without question, because she understands what it costs him to stay in this conversation at all. Of course, she replies softly, standing up from her seat, but not leaving just yet, not walking away like before, because this time, she is not disappearing into a different world without a choice. She reaches into her bag slowly and places a simple card on the counter, sliding it toward him, not forcing it, just offering it. If you ever want answers, she says, meeting his eyes one last time, or if you just want to ask your own questions. Ethan looks at the card, then at her, and for a second, neither of them moves, because this moment feels like a quiet crossroads, not dramatic, not loud, but real. And as Olivia turns to leave, the bell above the door rings again, softer this time. Ethan's hand remains near the card, not picking it up yet, not pushing it away either. Because whatever happens next, it will not be decided in a single moment. And for the first time since that night in the rain, the choice is finally his. The bell above the door fades into the background, but the silence it leaves behind feels louder than anything else in the diner. Ethan stands there for a second longer than he should, his eyes fixed on the card resting on the counter, clean, simple, nothing flashy, just a name and a number that suddenly feel heavier than they should. He does not pick it up right away. Instead, he turns back to his work, pouring coffee, taking orders, moving through the motions like he always does. But something is off now, not in what he does, but in how it feels, every step slightly slower, every thought pulling him back to that moment, to her voice, to the way she said it started as a thank you, but is not that anymore. And that sentence lingers, repeating quietly in his mind, because he does not know what comes after something like that. He finishes his shift without saying much, nodding when needed, smiling when expected, but the weight of the day follows him all the way back to the truck, the sun already setting, casting long shadows across the empty lot. He sits in the driver's seat, the door still open, letting the cool air settle around him. And for a while, he just stares ahead, not moving, not deciding, just thinking, because this is not just about her. It is about what comes with her, the world she belongs to, the kind of life that does not just cross paths with his by accident, except it already did. And that is the part he cannot ignore. He reaches into his pocket slowly and pulls out the card, turning it between his fingers, reading her name again. Olivia Hayes. It feels different now. Not just a name, but a door. One that leads somewhere he has never been. Somewhere he is not sure he wants to go. He leans back in the seat, exhaling slowly, remembering the rain, the way she stood there without anything, the way she looked at him like he mattered in a moment where he felt like nothing. And that memory does not match the image of a CEO sitting behind glass walls and making decisions that shape entire companies. But somehow, both versions of her exist, and that is what unsettles him the most. Across the city, Olivia stands alone in her office again, the skyline glowing with evening lights. But she is not looking at it this time. Her focus is on her phone, resting quietly on the desk, untouched. She has made calls all day, signed documents, led meetings. But none of it has felt as uncertain as this moment right here. Waiting, not knowing if he will call, not knowing if he will walk away completely. And for someone who has built her life on control, on certainty, this feels unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable. She walks to the window, arms crossed lightly, replaying everything she said, everything she did, wondering if she pushed too far, if she should have told him the truth sooner, if any of that would have changed the outcome. But deep down, she knows this is not something she can control. This is his decision, his pace, his choice. And for the first time in a long time, she has to accept that. Back in the quiet parking lot, Ethan finally moves, his thumb hovering over the number on the card, not dialing yet, just holding it there, because once he makes that call, things will change. There is no going back to simple, no returning to the version of that night where nothing else existed except the rain and a shared umbrella. He closes his eyes for a brief second, then opens them again, more certain now than he was before, not because he has all the answers, but because he knows one thing clearly. That moment meant something, and he is not ready to pretend it did not. His thumb presses down. The phone begins to ring, and somewhere across the city, Olivia's phone lights up on her desk, her name reflecting softly on the glass as the sound cuts through the quiet. And in that instant, both of their worlds begin to shift in a way neither of them can stop anymore. The sound of the phone ringing feels louder than it should, cutting through the quiet of Olivia's office like something fragile about to break. She turns quickly, almost too quickly, eyes locking onto the screen as his name appears, Ethan Cole, and for a second, she does not move, not because she does not want to answer, but because this moment feels real in a way nothing else has all day. Then she reaches for it, steadying her breath before she picks up. "Hello," she says, her voice softer than it has been in hours. Across the city, Ethan sits in his truck, phone pressed to his ear, staring out at nothing in particular, his heart beating just a little faster than he expects. "It is me," he says, simple, no introduction, no explanation, and there is a pause, not awkward, not empty, just full of everything neither of them knows how to say yet. Olivia closes her eyes briefly, letting that voice settle, grounding her in something that feels more honest than anything else in her world. "I know," she replies quietly, and that answer shifts something again, because it is not about recognition, it is about connection, about the fact that this moment was not forced, not arranged, but chosen. Ethan exhales slowly, leaning back in his seat. "I almost did not call," he admits, and the honesty in that statement hangs there, unpolished, real. Olivia nods slightly, even though he cannot see her. "I am glad you did," she says, and she means it in a way that goes beyond politeness, beyond expectation. There is another pause, but this one feels different, less uncertain, more open, like both of them are stepping into something without knowing where it leads. "So now what?" Ethan asks, not sarcastic, not guarded, just asking the question that matters. Olivia walks toward the window, looking out at the city lights flickering to life. "Now you ask me anything you want," she says, giving him something she rarely gives anyone: space, honesty, no control. Ethan lets out a small breath at that, considering, weighing what he wants to know against what he is ready to hear. "Why me?" he asks finally, and the question lands exactly where it should. Direct, unavoidable. Olivia does not hesitate this time, because she has already answered it in her own mind more times than she can count. Because you did not see me, she says softly. Not the title, not the company, not the money, just me standing in the rain. Ethan looks down at his hands, remembering that moment clearly now. The cold, the weight of the storm, the simple choice that did not feel like a choice at all. Anyone would have done that, he says, almost dismissing it. But Olivia shakes her head, even though he cannot see it. No, she replies, her voice firm now, not defensive, just certain. They would not have. The certainty in her tone makes him pause, because part of him knows she is right, even if he does not want to admit it. And what is this now? He asks after a moment, quieter this time. And Olivia takes a breath before answering, because this is where things shift from past to present, from explanation to intention. Now, she says slowly, it is me asking if I can see you again, without any secrets. The words settle between them, simple, but carrying weight. Ethan leans forward slightly, his elbow resting on his knee, thinking, because this is not just about meeting again, it is about stepping into something that is no longer accidental, no longer one moment in the rain. It is a choice, a direction, a possibility. No suits, he says after a second, a small condition, but one that means more than it sounds. Olivia smiles softly, a real one this time. No suits, she agrees immediately, and for the first time since that night, something light returns to the space between them, not certainty, not resolution, but something that feels like a beginning. Tomorrow, Ethan says, not asking, just deciding, and Olivia nods again, her voice steady. Tomorrow, and as the call ends, both of them sit in silence for a moment longer than necessary, because they both understand something has shifted, something has moved from chance into choice, and whatever happens next, it will not be because of a storm, it will be because they decided to step into it together. The next day does not feel like a normal day. Even though everything around Ethan moves exactly the same. The diner opens, the coffee brews, customers come and go, but there is a quiet tension beneath it all, something waiting just beneath the surface. He checks the clock more than he usually would. Not obsessively, just enough to notice time passing in a different way, slower, more deliberate, like each minute is leading somewhere specific, somewhere he chose. By the time his shift ends, the sky has already begun to soften into late afternoon light, the kind that makes the city feel almost calm, almost forgiving. He washes his hands, dries them carefully, and steps outside, pausing for a second on the sidewalk as if grounding himself before moving forward. Across town, Olivia stands in front of her closet longer than she has in years, not because she does not know what to wear, but because for the first time, it matters in a way that has nothing to do with image or expectation. She reaches past the tailored suits, the polished outfits that define her world, and chooses something simple, something that does not speak for her before she even says a word. When she steps out of her building, there is no assistant waiting, no schedule in her hand, just a quiet decision to show up as herself. They meet in a small park not far from the diner, a place neither of them planned, but both somehow understood. Open space, neutral ground, no titles, no roles, just two people standing under the same sky again, this time without the storm. Ethan arrives first, hands in his pockets, scanning the area without really thinking about it. And then he sees her, walking toward him, and for a second, it feels like that night all over again, not because of the rain, but because of the way everything else seems to fade when she steps into his space. She slows as she gets closer, her expression calm but not guarded, just present. You came, she says softly, and there is something in that simple statement that feels like relief. Ethan nods once, a faint smile touching his lips. You said no suits, he replies, and she glances down briefly, almost amused. I keep my word, she says, and that small exchange shifts the air between them, easing something that had been tight before. They start walking without deciding to, side by side along the path. Not too close, not distant either, just enough space to breathe, to think, to feel out what this is becoming. So this is your world, Olivia says after a moment, glancing around at the park, at the people sitting on benches, kids running across the grass. Life. Moving in simple ways, Ethan shrugs slightly. Part of it, he answers, then adds. The part that does not require a meeting to exist. Olivia smiles at that. A real one. Unfiltered. And for a second, she looks less like the person who commands boardrooms and more like someone who is just discovering something new. They talk about small things at first, where he grew up, how long she has lived in the city, nothing heavy, nothing that demands answers, just pieces of themselves offered carefully, but naturally. And the more they talk, the easier it becomes, the distance between them softening, shifting into something that feels less like two different worlds colliding and more like two people finding a common ground. At one point they stop near a bench, neither sitting, just standing there as the conversation slows, not because there is nothing left to say, but because something unspoken is building again, something that does not need words yet. Ethan looks at her, really looks this time, not at who she is supposed to be, but at who she is right now, standing in front of him. And for the first time since he learned her name, since everything shifted, he feels something settle, not certainty, not complete trust, but something close enough to take a step forward. You are different here, he says quietly, and Olivia meets his gaze, understanding exactly what he means. So are you, she replies, and neither of them argues with that, because they both know it is true. And as the sun begins to dip lower, casting long shadows across the park, what started as a question, a risk, a single phone call, begins to feel like something more, something that is no longer about what happened in the past, but about what they are. Choosing to build now, one step at a time. The light in the park begins to fade slowly, the golden glow softening into something cooler, quieter, and with it, the conversation between them shifts too, not ending, just deepening into something that no longer needs constant words to hold it together. They sit on the bench now, not too close, but close enough that the space between them feels intentional rather than distant. Ethan leans forward slightly, elbows resting on his knees, looking out at the path ahead, while Olivia sits with her hands folded loosely in her lap, her posture relaxed in a way that would surprise anyone who knows her in a boardroom. You ever get tired of it? Ethan asks after a while, his voice calm but thoughtful. Olivia turns her head toward him, not fully understanding at first. Tired of what? She asks, and he gestures vaguely, not toward anything specific, but everything at once. Being the person everyone expects you to be, he says, and the question lands differently than the others, not surface level, not casual. Olivia looks away for a moment, considering, because this is not a question people usually ask her, and it is not one she answers lightly. Sometimes, she says finally, her voice softer now, more reflective. But I chose that life, so I try not to complain about it. Ethan nods slightly, understanding more than he expected. Does not mean it is easy, he replies, and she glances back at him, a small acknowledgement passing between them, because he is right, and he did not need to be part of her world to see that. The silence that follows is not uncomfortable. It feels earned, like something they are both settling into. But then Olivia shifts slightly, turning more toward him, her expression changing just enough to signal something more serious. Can I ask you something? She says, and Ethan looks at her, giving a small nod. Yeah, he answers, and she hesitates, just for a second, choosing her words carefully. Why did you stay? She asks, and he frowns slightly, not defensive, just unsure. What do you mean? He says, and Olivia meets his gaze steadily. After you found out who I was, after everything felt complicated, you could have walked away. You almost did, she says, her voice steady but carrying something deeper underneath. So why did you call? The question hangs between them, simple on the surface, but heavier than anything they have said so far. Ethan looks away again, not to avoid her, but to find the answer in a way that feels honest, because this is not something he decided in a single moment. It is something that built quietly, piece by piece. Because that night was real, he says finally, his voice low but certain. Not the situation, not the timing, just what happened between us. Olivia listens closely, not interrupting, not filling the space, just letting him speak. And I could not pretend it did not matter just because everything else around it got complicated. He continues, and there is no hesitation in his words now, just clarity. I needed to know if that part was still real, or if I just imagined it. Olivia feels something shift inside her at that, something she has been holding tightly without realizing it. She lets out a slow breath, her shoulders relaxing just slightly. It was real, she says, not quickly, not defensively, but with a calm certainty that matches his. It still is. And for a moment, neither of them looks away, because this is the part that matters, not the titles, not the differences, just whether that connection exists beyond one moment in the rain. And as the last light fades from the sky, something settles between them, not resolved, not perfect, but real enough to keep going, real enough to take another step forward without knowing exactly where it leads. The air in the park grows cooler as the evening settles in, and with it, the quiet understanding between them begins to take shape into something more tangible, not just words, not just shared moments, but a direction neither of them can ignore anymore. Ethan leans back slightly on the bench, his gaze drifting upward as the first few city lights flicker on in the distance, while Olivia watches him, not with curiosity anymore, but with a kind of focus that feels personal, like she is no longer trying to figure him out, just trying to be present with him. So what happens when your world catches up to this? Ethan asks after a moment, his tone calm, but carrying a layer of realism that has not disappeared. Olivia does not look away, because she knows exactly what he means: the meetings, the expectations, the people who would not understand why she is sitting in a park instead of a boardroom. Then I decide what matters more, she answers simply, and there is no hesitation in her voice, no uncertainty, just a quiet certainty that feels different from the authority she carries in her professional life. Ethan studies her for a second, weighing that answer, not challenging it, just measuring how real it is. Because words are easy, but choices are not. That sounds simple, he says. A faint edge of skepticism beneath the surface. Olivia nods slightly, acknowledging the truth in that. It is not, she admits, but neither is walking away from something that feels right. The honesty in her voice settles between them, and for a moment, it feels like they are standing at the edge of something neither of them fully understands, but both are aware of. Ethan looks down at his hands, then back at her, his expression softer now, less guarded than before, but still careful. I am not part of your world, he says, not as a complaint, not as insecurity, just a fact he has come to accept. Olivia shifts slightly closer, not enough to close the space completely, but enough to show she is not standing on the other side of it anymore. Maybe not, she replies quietly, but that does not mean you cannot be part of my life. The distinction is small, but it carries weight, and Ethan feels it, the difference between being pulled into something and being invited into it. He exhales slowly, considering, because this is where things become real, not just conversations in a park, but decisions that shape what comes next. And what happens when people start asking questions? He asks, his voice steady, grounded in reality. Olivia smiles slightly, not dismissive, just confident in a different way. They always do, she says, but I have spent years answering to expectations that were never really mine. I think I can handle a few more. Ethan lets out a quiet breath at that, something between a laugh and acceptance, because part of him recognizes that strength. Even if he does not fully understand it, the space between them shifts again, softer now, less about differences and more about what they are willing to face together. The park around them grows quieter as people begin to leave, the path emptying, the world narrowing down to just the two of them, and the moment they are standing in, Olivia glances at him, her expression thoughtful, but steady. I am not asking you to change anything about your life, she says, her voice clear, intentional. I am asking if you are willing to let me be part of it. The simplicity of that question lands deeper than anything else she has said, because it does not come with conditions, does not come with expectations, just an open possibility. Ethan looks at her for a long second, not searching for answers this time, but feeling for something real, something that matches what he has experienced so far, and slowly, almost without realizing it, he nods, not a grand gesture, not a dramatic decision, just a quiet agreement to take another step forward. And as they sit there, the city continuing on around them, something settles into place, not perfectly, not completely, but enough to move forward. Enough to believe that what started in the rain might actually have a place in the light. The night settles fully around them, the last traces of daylight fading into a quiet blue that wraps the park in stillness. And for a moment, everything feels suspended, like the world has given them just enough space to decide what this connection is really worth. Ethan stands up slowly from the bench, not abruptly, not to leave, but because something in him needs movement, needs to feel grounded again. Olivia follows his motion with her eyes, then rises as well. Matching his pace without hesitation, they begin walking again, slower this time, side by side along the dimly lit path, their steps falling into a natural rhythm, neither leading, neither following, just moving forward together. This does not stay simple, Ethan says after a while, his voice steady but thoughtful, not pushing away the moment, just acknowledging what comes next. Olivia nods slightly, her gaze forward, understanding the weight behind his words. No, it does not, she answers honestly. But that does not mean it has to become something we do not recognize. Ethan glances at her briefly, considering that, because part of him expects things to change the moment her world fully enters his. Expectations, pressure, things he has spent his life trying to avoid. People around you, he continues, choosing his words carefully. They are going to have opinions. Olivia lets out a quiet breath, almost a soft laugh, not amused, but familiar with that reality. They always do, she says, but their opinions have never been about me. Not really. They are about what I represent. Ethan slows his steps slightly, absorbing that, because it is not something he has ever had to think about, being seen as a person versus being seen as something else entirely. And what do you represent? He asks, not challenging, just curious. Olivia pauses for a second before answering, not because she does not know, but because she is choosing how to say it in a way that matters here. To most people, I represent success, control, everything they think they want, she says quietly, then looks at him, her expression softer now, more honest. But that is not what I was looking for that night. Ethan feels that shift again, the difference between the image and the person, and it makes something inside him settle just a little more. They reach the edge of the park where the city lights begin to take over, brighter, louder, closer to the world she belongs to. And for a second, the contrast feels sharper, more real. If this works, Ethan says slowly, stopping near the sidewalk, turning to face her fully. It is not because of what you have, it is because of what we had that night. Olivia meets his gaze without hesitation, her expression steady, grounded. I know, she says, and there is no doubt in her voice, no hesitation, just certainty built from something real, something she cannot manufacture or control. A car passes by, headlights sweeping across them briefly, then disappearing, leaving them in that quiet space again. Ethan reaches into his jacket pocket without thinking, his fingers brushing against something familiar, and for a moment, he freezes, then slowly pulls it out. The old umbrella, slightly worn, still carrying the marks of that storm. Olivia's eyes fall to it immediately, and something soft shifts in her expression, something deeper than words. I almost threw it away. Ethan admits quietly, looking down at it, then back at her, but it felt wrong. Olivia takes a small step closer, not reaching for it, just standing within that shared space. I am glad you did not, she says softly, and the meaning behind it is clear, not just about the umbrella, but about everything it represents, the moment, the choice, the beginning of something neither of them expected. They stand there for a second longer, the city moving around them, but not interrupting what is happening between them, because this is not about where they come from anymore. It is about what they are choosing now. And as Ethan looks at her, then back at the umbrella in his hand, he realizes something simple but important. This was never just about a storm. It was about what two people do when everything else is stripped away, and whether they are willing to carry that forward into something real. The city feels louder now, brighter, alive in a way that contrasts everything they just shared in the quiet of the park, but neither of them steps away, neither of them breaks the moment. Because something important is settling into place between them, not perfectly, not without questions, but real enough to stand on. Ethan looks at the umbrella in his hand one more time, then slowly closes it, the soft click echoing faintly in the space between them, like the end of something and the beginning of something else at the same time. I think this belongs to both of us now, he says, not as a joke, not as something light, but as a quiet acknowledgement of what that night created. Olivia's eyes soften at that, her gaze steady on him. Then maybe we should stop calling it a coincidence, she replies, and there is something in her voice that feels certain, grounded, like she has finally stopped searching for something and started holding on to it instead. Ethan nods slightly, not rushing the moment, just letting it unfold, because for the first time, this does not feel like something that needs to be figured out all at once. It just needs to be lived. They begin walking again, not back into the park, not fully into the city either, just forward, side by side. And the simplicity of that movement feels more meaningful than anything complicated. You know this is going to get harder, Ethan says after a while, his tone not negative, just honest. Olivia glances at him, a faint smile touching her lips. Most things that matter do, she answers, and he cannot argue with that, because he has seen it in his own life, in different ways, with different stakes. But the truth is the same. They reach the corner where their paths would normally split, where the world would pull them back into separate directions. But this time, neither of them stops immediately, as if both are aware that this is where decisions become real, not just spoken, but lived. Ethan looks at her, really looks, not at the CEO, not at the woman who walked into the diner with a hidden truth, but at the person who stood in the rain, who came back, who chose to stay. Even when it became complicated, I am not going to pretend I know what this is yet, he says slowly, choosing his words carefully, but I know I do not want to walk away from it. Olivia takes a small breath at that, something in her shoulders easing, because she was not looking for certainty, she was looking for that, for someone willing to stay in the unknown instead of retreating from it. Neither do I, she says quietly, and there is no hesitation in her voice, just truth. A car pulls up along the curb, not the black SUV this time, just a regular ride passing through the city, and for a second, the contrast feels symbolic, like a reminder that not everything about her world has to follow them into this. Ethan glances at it, then back at her. You going to be okay getting home? He asks, simple, familiar, the same kind of question he might ask anyone, but it carries something more now. Olivia smiles, a real one, unguarded. I think I will be, she answers, then pauses for just a second before adding, as long as I know this is not where it ends. Ethan holds her gaze, and for a moment, everything feels still again, like that night in the rain, like the space between two choices, and then he nods, not dramatic, not grand, just certain enough to mean something. It does not, he says, and with that, something settles, not an ending, not even a resolution, but a continuation, a quiet promise that whatever this is, it is not finished yet. Olivia steps back slightly, giving the moment space instead of holding on to it too tightly. And as she turns to go, she glances back once, not to check, but to remember. Ethan stands there for a second longer, the umbrella still in his hand, the city moving around him. And for the first time in a long while, he does not feel like he is standing still while everything else moves forward. He feels like he is part of it again, like something unexpected has found its way into his life and refused to leave. And as he turns and walks in the opposite direction, there is no sense of loss, only the quiet understanding that this story, whatever it becomes, has only just begun.